Friends, colleagues, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the O'Reilly Institute here at Trinity College, home of the School of Computer Science and Statistics and the headquarters of the Research Ireland ADAPT Research Centre for Human-Centric AI. I'm Declan McKibben, I'm Executive Director with ADAPT, and I am delighted to kick off this evening's launch of the AI Accountability Lab with our colleague and friend, Dr Abeba Birhane. Abeba will need no introduction. She's a rock star. She's extraordinary, visionary, and she's inspirational. An influential researcher, a best paper in Europe. For those who don't know, it's the best machine learning conference, front cover of Time magazine, and guiding AI policy development in Ireland and globally through the United Nations. So without any further ado, I'm going to hand over to Dr. Abeba Birhane.
Thank you all so much for giving up your Thursday evening to be here to join us for the launch of the AI Accountability Lab. So over the past years, artificial intelligence has undoubtedly become one of the hottest and the most contested topics. And not just a contested topic of interest within the research space, but also popular tools such as ChatGPT have become household names. And AI has also captured the attention of the media, policymakers, governments, and so on. However, there is no great consensus around what exactly AI is. And there are so many misunderstandings and misconceptions when it comes to AI. And of course, this all feeds into the current hype that we are seeing within the narratives we hear around artificial intelligence. And as scientists and as scholars and researchers, we are tasked with the responsibility of evaluating claims, especially around AI that we hear. And we are also tasked with reflecting with intellectual honesty, and the onus is on us to critically assess and to distinguish hype and misconception from reality and fact from fiction, and to use our academic freedom to intervene. So why AI accountability research? So AI systems are increasingly integrated into every social infrastructure. Employers increasingly use AI to make life-altering decisions. Excuse the noise from the train, it will pass. But also, schools and education institutes use AI to aid decision, for example, which student is likely to drop out. We also have child welfare agencies using AI to determine if a child is likely to be neglected by their parents. And people with limited proficiency of the English language are exposed to some sort of AI-based translation in public offices, benefit offices, schools, hospitals, clinics, courts, and so on. As a result, low-income families might be denied necessary treatments and medical aids and job opportunities, but also other benefits and services. And children might be separated from their parents if AI algorithms calculate that a child is likely to be neglected by the parents. In fact, according to a recent report by Tectonic Justice, 92 million low-income people in the US have some basic aspect of their lives decided by AI systems. That is over a quarter of the entire US population. There is common hope and wish and interest for AI systems to solve numerous societal economical problems that exist. And And most current narratives around AI equate AI with societal advancement and scientific progress, and emphasize the potential of AI to benefit all humanity. However, there is a massive gap between these hopes and wishes and the current reality. And what the AI accountability is all about, closing that gap or narrowing that gap. And a robust body of research, particularly audits and evaluations of AI systems, show that AI systems impact the most people that are at the margins of society. Also, it shows that the mass integration of AI systems into critical social infrastructure tends to disadvantage and disfranchise those that are already at the margins. So people with gender, race, ethnic minorities, people with low-income populations, and those that are already struggling. Furthermore, according to another recent survey by the FTC, large social media and streaming companies such as WhatsApp, Facebook, YouTube harvest enormous amount of data. And such data, lucrative for these businesses, endangers people's privacy and also threatens freedom of speech, freedom of expression, and exposes people to a whole host of harms, such as identity theft. So, according to also this report, these companies have failed to adequately protect kids and teens online. So, in summary, the integration of AI systems into critical infrastructure tends to widen existing inequality, and it tends to diminish fundamental rights while allowing the accumulation of wealth and power in the hands of few. So how do we move forward? In order to ensure that AI technologies extend and not hinder equity, justice, fundamental rights, and that these technologies contribute to societal benefits and human flourishing, it's crucial that the AI systems it's crucial that we thoroughly test and evaluate these AI systems before they are deployed, before they are integrated into critical social infrastructure. It's also important that those that are developing and deploying these systems are held accountable for the models and for the AI systems that they are releasing into the world. And this is what the AI Accountability Lab will do. This is the core mission of our work. We aim to ensure that technologies work for the public, and more particularly for those at the margins of society, who tend to be, again, disproportionately impacted. And research excellence and technical rigor are of paramount importance to us. We aspire to conduct our studies and to execute our audits and evaluations with the highest scientific rigor and standard possible. At the same time, we are also a research lab that aims to serve and work closely with the public and impacted populations. Therefore, our primary focus is studying and evaluating and auditing actual AI systems that have societal implications, as opposed to, say, auditing toy models for the sake of intellectual exercise. Thus, we aim to partner and collaborate with other research centers, civil society and rights groups in order to co-define specific research agenda under the broad research objective of the AI accountability that we have already set, to produce work that is relevant and helpful for our stakeholders. We hope our work will be relevant and helpful and informative to a range of stakeholders, including governments, civil society, the public in general, and regulators and policymakers. Some of the work that we plan to carry out include systematic and holistic evaluation of AI systems, ranging from simple tools to large systems such as large language models, with a focus, for example, of understanding model behavior under different circumstances. We also aim to systematically study the downstream impact of deployed AI systems. Furthermore, we will be pursuing work that aims to critically examine wealth accumulation, potential corporate capture of the AI regulation process, or other extractive practices that exist across the entire AI pipeline. So that means we won't be just working on specific AI models per se. We are examining the entire AI pipeline. We, as well as aspiring to become the center for accountability research across Europe, Africa, and globally, we also plan to train the next generation of AI auditors, evaluators, and critical thinkers. To that effect, we are recruiting PhD students for the coming academic year. And finally, research or a research lab or the success of a given project comes really down to the people you have around, the people you work with, the people that support you, the people that guide you and mentor you. To that effect, I would like to say a few thanks. I'm very lucky to be hosted by ADAPT, the SFI Research Center for AI, and Professor Dave Lewis and John Kelleher. You have been amazing, and your teams have really been stellar. Thank you. In particular, I would like to thank Olivia. She's over there. She's behind the collaborator she's behind a lot of what you are seeing today. And Alex as well, Alex Arwin, thank you very much. And I also have special thanks to Declan McKibben, the Executive Director of ADAPT, who has been a great supporter all along and helped me navigate all the processes and regulations that I needed to go through to set up and launch this lab. Another critical supporter is Professor Gregory O'Hare in the School of Computer Science and Statistics, who I have been with for the past 2 years, first as adjunct assistant professor and now as a postdoc. The team in the School of Computer Science and Statistics have been amazing, and the support is unparalleled. Betul, Sandy, Joey, and a lot more others. Thank you so much for your support. And it's a pleasure to be in a school that values and supports ambitious research like this. I appreciate it, thank you. And special thanks to also Research Ireland, formerly SFI, for the help and guidance in answering my endless questions with utmost patience. Finally, Trinity College Dublin is a dream institution with a rich tradition for exceptional teaching, influential academic research, and impact. I really feel at home here. I couldn't have found a better place. Thank you. As a research lab that works on accountability, independence, and complete absence of conflicts of interest, and absolute academic freedom are the most important and critical elements. That means in order for your work to have the credibility and validity, in order for your results, for your research output to be taken with the highest credibility and validity, the independence and the academic freedom you pursue the research with is extremely important. And this is why we have been extremely selective with our funders. And this is why I am so honored and grateful to have support from 3 amazing supporters, groups of funders. These are the AI Collaborative, an initiative of the Omidyar Group, Luminate, and the John D. and Catherine T. MacArthur Foundation. Thank you for supporting the AI Accountability Lab. And finally, I was once told early days in my PhD that everybody is smart. Distinguish yourself by being kind. And I have been lucky because I'm constantly surrounded by smart and kind and thoughtful people. To that effect, I would like to give a shout out to the Complex Software Lab for providing that rich environment that allowed me to thrive during my PhD. And finally, last but not least, to my PhD supervisor, Antri Ventres, he's standing right there. He not only supported me during my PhD, but also thereafter. He has been critical support for me throughout the years, especially over the past year as I navigated the uncharted territory of grant writing, budgeting, and setting up the lab. Thank you, Anthony. And thank you all again for being here. Thank you so much, and enjoy the rest of the program.
Right. Thank you, Abeba. Professor Gregory O'Hare is the head of the School of Computer Science and Statistics. He's a principal investigator in ADAPT and a strong supporter of Abeba and her work, as Abeba just mentioned. So I'll now invite Professor O'Hare to the podium.
I guess what you shouldn't do is drink red wine before you have to speak. I've just noticed the error of my ways, and everyone else has been suitably abstemious in terms of only clutching their glasses of water, but anyway. So it's a pleasure to be here, Abeba. This is a culmination in a considerable amount of work, not least your career to date. But it is also the harvesting of a frenetic amount of activity that has been engaged of late. We always seem to organize such events whenever we're in the midst of our rush hour commuter traffic, so you'll just have to bear with that. Some of us that are used to these things just seamlessly talk through it. It seems only a very short number of days previously that I was standing here and there was a similar celebration of another generous donation in this AI space. CK Delta, a not very well-known household company, pledged just short of 1 million euros for to set up some endeavor in the AI space. So it seems like it's like Dublin Bus, that these sorts of events are occurring with a remarkable regularity. I'm sure that will not be the case. But it's a good moment to be in Trinity College Dublin. It's a good moment to be in the School of Computer Science and Statistics. Let me just say a few things about Abeba, because she mentioned that it was important to be kind, attributes that she has in abundance. It's also important in life to have a level of humility, again, attributes that she has in abundance. But in order to address her humility, let me regale you with some of her achievements. She, of course, did her not only 1 degree, but 2 degrees at the Open University, a BSc in psychology and a BSc in philosophy. A heady cocktail if ever there was one. Thereafter, she completed an MSc in cognitive science at University College Dublin, and a PhD, as we've already heard, under the considerable scrutiny of Anthony. And thereafter, Abeba washed up on our shores, and we're delighted that she did so. Her CV is festooned with accolades. I'm just going to pluck 1 or 2, just for the purpose of embarrassment. As was already stated, the Time 100 AI list was, of course, a notable mention. 8 amazing women in AI you need to follow. Well, I mean, I think it couldn't have been stated any more succinctly and appropriately. 100 brilliant women in AI ethics Hall of Fame honoree. 80 African women advancing artificial intelligence in Africa and around the world. The list goes on, but I'll stop there. I think the point has been suitably made. I shan't embarrass you anymore, I promise. Let me just take a moment of turning my attention and vote of thanks to the very significant and generous funding from our 3 donor organizations. The grant in total comes to circa a value of 1.5 million. There are 3 groups that I want to be at pains to, on behalf of the School of Computer Science and Statistics, to extend our profound appreciation for your generosity. And sometimes these decisions are difficult decisions to make. I think in this particular circumstance, we tried to make that decision as easy as was possible. So the 3 particular donators are the AI Collaborative, the Luminate Group, and the MacArthur Foundation. That triptych of funding is what is going to mobilize this laboratory. And I think we're delighted and privileged to have representatives from each of those organizations in our midst. I apologize for any mispronunciations of your names. Fanny Hidvige from the AI Collaborative. I don't know if Fanny's here. There you are. Apologies for mangling your name. Tanil Bergen from the Luminate Group. Tanil, are we? Fantastic. And Naomi Alexandra Naidu from the Luminate Group. Naomi? Yeah. So thank you on behalf of the school. A very, very earnest and profound vote of thanks for your confidence in this initiative. Just to call out a few other distinguished guests that are in our midst, we're delighted to have Joe Hackett, the Secretary General of the Department of Foreign Affairs. I know that Joe's days are a bit like my own. They're very long and they tend to get even more lengthy. So we're so appreciative of you being here. And Dr. Patricia Scanlon, AI Ambassador to Ireland. Again, we're delighted to have Patricia in our midst. By way of conclusion, that's always a good phrase whenever you're listening to speeches, I know that. We have witnessed a new dawn of AI that's associated with, I guess, particularly generative AI, which has heralded a velocity of AI adoption that hitherto has not been witnessed. The provenance of such systems is, however, fundamental in terms of embracing and invoking confidence in systems of this nature. The AI Accountability Lab will be at the forefront of research that will examine and scrutinize such systems. Through algorithmic audibility, it will create a national and a European centre of excellence in this space, delivering thought leadership and informing best practice. The money and the generous benefaction will be such that it will enable us to mobilise globally excellent human capital in the form of initially 1 postdoc, 3 PhDs, and a lab manager. And I'm struck by what Abeba said. This is my finishing sentence, so I'll pause until the train passes. I think it's fair to say in the School of Computer Science and Statistics here at Trinity College, we do not strive for mediocrity. So I absolutely echo the comments that you made. And I'm going to leave you with a quote from Oscar Wilde. Many of my colleagues know that I frequently go to this particular quotation. And Oscar Wilde stated that success is a science. If you have the right conditions, you get the right result. So for Abeba and for the AI Accountability Lab, we will endeavour to provide the right conditions. Thank you, everyone.
Great. Thank you, Professor O'Hare. We're honoured, as Greg mentioned, that Joe Hackett, Secretary General of the Department of Foreign Affairs, has joined us this evening for the launch of the AI Accountability Lab. I'd now like to hand over to Secretary General.
Good evening, everyone. Lovely to be here. This is not my alma mater, but it's a particular privilege to be invited back because I do come here frequently to talk to students, but I understand in your generosity you've invited many colleagues from UCD as well, which is my alma mater, so thank you for that, and a special shout out. Professor O'Hare, Professor Kelleher, Dr. Scanlon, and of course, especially Dr. Birhane, pleasure to be here, and thank you for the initiative that you're launching today. I also want to acknowledge my own colleagues, Owen Duggan, Nisha Kenny, Karen Gillanders. They're from a new entity we have in the Department of Foreign Affairs, which is around an international technology policy unit. And that's the newest unit we have in the organization, and it's a reflection of the fact that a growing number of foreign ministries are getting involved in international technology language and policy development, and particularly driven by the changes in foreign policy and society from artificial intelligence. So they're the reason I'm here, because they invited Dr. Birhane to speak to all of our department earlier this year on her work and the synergies between her work, values, human rights, and foreign policy. And it had a big impact, and I had a chance and a privilege to meet you when you came, and I know the feedback from many of our employees was extremely positive. Many people already have outlined your CV. I'll only add to it that we're particularly pleased to have you as a member of the government's AI Advisory Council, and I was reading the UN Secretary General Guterres' tribute to you as he appointed you to the UN Advisory Council as well, which is a great tribute to you, but a great tribute to Ireland, the fact that you are here with us and representative on such an important body, because it's very important in our conversations, no matter how developed Ireland's policy becomes, no matter how developed the European Union's policy, that matters little unless we take a global approach and bring everybody with us, and you're a huge advocate for that. Some of you might be wondering why you're not hearing from the Secretary General of Enterprise, Trade and Employment or Higher Education. That's all very interesting, but why is somebody from the Department of Foreign Affairs here? Fair question, but something that we have tried to do over recent years is invest more in our relationship with universities and third level sector. A, because it's very energizing, but B, because foreign policy is not the preserve of those of us in the Department of Foreign Affairs or Ivy House. Foreign policy belongs to the people of Ireland. And I've often thought that there isn't a rich enough, inclusive enough conversation in Ireland about foreign policy. And that's why myself and my colleagues have spent quite a bit of time over recent years engaging with different faculties throughout Ireland amongst all our third level institutions, including here. I have to say, initially when I was thinking about the places I would be talking, it probably didn't include the Department of Computer Science. So it's good to be here and to show that foreign policy is increasingly broad in its reach. What I would say is that this is tricky space. I mean, as you were talking earlier, the trains were passing overhead, and I couldn't help but think of, you know, the great big transformation that was the Industrial Revolution, and the fact that the indicator of that change and the driver of that change were indeed our trusty trains up there. And the pace of change that happened in the Industrial Revolution seemed overwhelming to communities and governments and society at that time. But it took many decades, indeed it took centuries for that change to happen. And indeed it took centuries for societies and governments to put guardrails around that process, to develop a human rights system, a labor rights system, a framework that would protect the security of states and societies from the changes that were happening. We don't have that luxury. In fact, the companies that are the biggest drivers of change, the most disruptive companies in the world, the most successful companies in the world, many of them didn't exist 10 years ago. And very few of them, if any, existed 20 years ago. And the pace of change, therefore, for societies, for economies, for our security systems, but most importantly for our people, can seem, and is, overwhelming, the pace and the nature of it. So governments, including the Irish government, faced with the transformation that artificial intelligence has the potential to represent, have to think carefully about how we approach it. Because most people don't know what artificial intelligence is. It's a buzzword. They know it's another technological revolution, but they've experienced 5 or 6 of those in the last 20 years. They probably think that it carries risks, but they also think it probably carries benefits. They probably assume it will further erode their privacy, but they probably calculate that they've already ceded most of that already and what's further to lose. But the one thing they all feel is they've no control over it, and there's nothing that they can do about it. And therefore, they trust, maybe that's the wrong word, they rely on the government and systems to provide those guardrails. And you, as independent of government, also will challenge us through this lab, and hopefully, though, rather than just challenge us, you will help us shape those guidelines and those guardrails. Now, it's my colleagues in the Department of Enterprise, Trade and Employment, it's Minister Burke, it's Minister Cleary, and their successors, if there's a different government, that are tasked with framing that response. And you won't be surprised to hear, I think they've done a very good job. But let me just explain why I say that. First of all, we need a policy, we need a strategy, we need a framework to help shape our approach. And as you know, or most of you know, we've had an AI strategy since 2021, and then it had a total refresh just earlier this month. This strategy framed around the idea of here for good. And yes, it accentuates the positive. It accentuates the FDI opportunities here, which is important to make us a leader across Europe for FDI. But more importantly, it tries to talk to the public about the benefits that can come to our society. The benefits in the health sector, the benefits in the education sector, in the agri sector, and weather forecasting, so that it isn't something necessarily that people, A, have no control over, and B, should be afraid of. But I like to think, you can judge, that it also doesn't shy away from the risks. The risks both to the issues I talked about earlier, but also the risks around fundamental rights and human rights and transparency and the need for greater accountability. And I think some of that is even emphasized to a greater extent in the refresh document that came out earlier this month. I think we also recognize that this is new to governments. We do not have all the answers, and therefore we need partners. We need partners who have expertise, more than civil servants will have, but we also need partners who will challenge us and engage with us. And that's why Dr. Scanlon, when she was appointed the first ambassador for AI, and then that changed and evolved into the role she currently has as chair of the new National Advisory Council on Artificial Intelligence, which you're also a member of. And that National Council will help advise government, will help guide government, will help challenge government, will help showcase best international practice, particularly around those guardrails that I mentioned earlier. We've also critically need a regulatory framework. And I've spent much of my career working in the European Union and working on the design of regulation in certain areas, including the GDPR. So Europe is good at regulation. I happen to think that having the European Union provide a regulatory framework around artificial intelligence in the form of the AI Act is something that Ireland should be very thankful and grateful for. Because Europe together as a market of 500 million people, putting in place a regulatory framework that will provide the global standard. Because let's face it, nobody is going to regulate in the way we will regulate that puts transparency and human rights front and center in the regulatory approach the way the European Union did. The United States won't do it, China won't do it, other countries won't do it. And by doing so, backed up by the strength and value of our market, we have an opportunity to set global standards. Now, I know that's a challenging conversation. There are people in industry, there are probably people in this room who think that sometimes Europe tips over into excessive regulation to the point where it stifles innovation and therefore puts Europe and potentially Ireland behind the United States and elsewhere when it comes to driving the opportunities of AI. But I think our public want that. I think our public have been through the disruption of the last 20 years when maybe those guardrails were a little late in coming, and they don't want us to make that mistake again. I could be wrong, time will tell. I don't think anybody knows the answer to that. But the framework that we have through the AI Act is the best model we have for now. And we've started to roll out and implement it. We've appointed and identified the initial, I think it's 9 authorities here who will be tasked primarily for ensuring the respect of fundamental rights, and they are working closely with the National Advisory Council to identify which areas should be subject to initial scrutiny. And there's a high level of independence around that. And then we've got the organisation, the lab we're launching this evening, because you will do independent global research and analysis of the technology and stress test it to see if it's consistent with those standards that we require under the AI Act. And I can't say I pretend to understand half of what you said in terms of the technical issues, but what I do know listening to you, that we can rely on, trust you to provide that analysis and that hard data so that we can make the right policy decisions. Just before I finish, I do agree with you. You can basically speak for another half hour if you say, before I finish. But something that is very important to Ireland, because we have a large development programme. It's something Irish people are proud of. We spend nearly 2 billion of Irish taxpayers' money a year on our overseas development budget in different ways. And an important part of that is bridging, an increasingly important part is bridging digital divides globally. Just as that's an important issue here within communities, it's an important issue for us globally. And therefore, we were very pleased at the UN Summit of the Future, very grand title, but an important one in September of this year. One of the key themes there was the digital compact, and critical to that was bridging the digital divide. Now that's broader than AI, but I assume over the coming years that in fact AI will consume more and more of that conversation. And our Tánaiste Micheál Martin addressed a special session on that and reminded people both of the obligation to put a good global regulatory framework in place, and a good framework, we have that, but to back it up with investment with a special responsibility in those countries who are better off. And so that's at a macro level. We're doing some things at a very micro level in Malawi, where we're doing a lot of work through our program on assisting women and girls learn how to code better. We're doing a lot of work and investment in places like Vietnam to help farmers in certain areas invest in AI technology to help them make better decisions around planting of crops in the context of climate change. So we're doing more of that. We will be doing more of it because we're committing more to climate change budget than ever before. And that's something I think we need to do a better job of telling the story of. But the critical thing is impact, and that's why we will need a positive relationship with this organization as we go forward. So look, I'm honored to be here, really privileged to be part of the conversation. We'll deepen the relationship in the future between my colleagues who are here and this institution, and I wish you nothing but the greatest of success for the years ahead. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Secretary General. So next up this evening, we have the first of our fireside chats, moderated by our former Trinity colleague and current professor in the School of Computing in Dublin City University, Ellen Rush. So Ellen, can I call you to the podium to introduce your panel?
So I'm delighted to be here to introduce our panel today and to be at the opening of my esteemed colleagues' lab. So here today we have Abeba to start off with in our panel. We also have Dr Talat, who is a Chancellor's Fellow in the Responsible Machine Learning and Artificial Intelligence at the Centre for the Techno-Moral Futures and School of Informatics in the University of Edinburgh. We also have Roald Daub, who's an Assistant Professor in Policy and Technology and Management at Delft University of Technology, and focuses on socio-technical AI systems. So some great titles there, I have to say. So if you wouldn't mind welcoming them to the podium. So welcome, everybody. And I suppose we've been talking this entire evening about accountability. And I suppose one of the biggest questions we probably should be asking to start off with is who decides what accountability actually means? So we might start with you.
I mean, I guess we all collectively decide what that means, but I think it's important for us to remember that it can't just be, like, we can't just relegate this out to tech companies for self-regulation. We need to actually have conversations within the communities that are interested or that are inherently interested in the public good. So like within the civil science, within the civil service community, within academia and so on, and within regulation to say, we inherently need to define this from a people first position, and then we can think about other aspects and how that influences at a later point.
Yeah, absolutely. And how about you, Beth?
Yeah, I absolutely agree. But also I will add that in terms of accountability within the research space, over the past years, we have a genre of research that associates accountability with, specific AI models, for example, model evaluations, focusing on how a given AI model performs, if there are any discrepancy based on various factors such as race, gender, and so on. These are all important, but what I would like to add is accountability has to also extend to the entire AI pipeline. AI is not just the computational calculations, but also, from the data that is constantly gathered, that feeds AI system, that serves as training material for AI systems. So from the data gathering, data monitoring, data managing, data curation process, sorry about this.
No worries.
in the data pipeline. Also, before massive amounts of data are harvested and fed into AI systems, there is a lot of work that actually goes into detoxifying data sets, cleaning up data sets, labeling them, and so on. So it has to also include that. Then you get to building model deploying, and then you have the bigger societal uptake. You can't evaluate AI models all you want in a controlled environment, but when they are released into the world, there are infinite different ways that they can behave and that end up impacting people. So you also have to monitor how those AI systems actually, what results when they interact with various groups and people. But at another higher level, also AI is also the entire environment. So AI is also, the environmental necessities, the minerals, the massive amounts of energy, that's required to run GPUs, data centers, and so on, massive amounts of water that's required to cool data centers, and so on. So accountability has to extend, the entire AI pipeline.
Extremely multifaceted,
Yes.
and not just a box-ticking exercise at the end, I guess.
Exactly.
Yeah. And how about yourself, Will?
Yeah, perhaps I can take, that's a very a broad spectrum, and I think it's necessary. And a lot of what we do is to try to also come up with more integral forms of analysis where you situate an AI model in a particular application domain, but also understand what are the design practices behind it, and how do these practices also rely on infrastructure, computational infrastructures, and obviously the dependence on mostly big tech at the moment, but perhaps that will change over time. So one of the students in my lab has been thinking about this question, had a bachelor's in law, and then has been trained as a technology policy and management researcher, and has been spending the last 4 years trying to look at how public organizations are structuring their design practices. And it's not just the technical developers, but it's also the people that are in charge of compliance. Compliance is an important input to designing systems, obviously. It's the people that are interfacing with politicians or with the public to really translate concerns or ideas to design. And so we've mapped that to learn, because there wasn't much known about these sort of empirical understanding. And then he's worked on bringing principles of the rule of law, democratic principles, to these actors and trying to understand like how can we actually structure these design process, not just the use of the system, that's also very important. Lots of things can go wrong in terms of making wrong decisions based on faulty outputs of models, for instance, that impact citizens, as we just heard. But it's also like what kinds of rules, how does the rule of law apply to people developing these systems? And we're only at the start of this. Again, I think this gets to your point that this is going to take decades, but I think we need a lot more people working on these kinds of integration, I guess, of, in this case, the history of public administration and service and technology development.
So rolling back to regulation, I suppose, in a certain capacity there, and how to actually regulate each and every part of that entire process in a realistic way, I suppose. And I suppose, Abeba, you spoke in your opening talk a little bit about the reasons why we need accountability in AI. But I wonder if we can outline some of the specific reasons why we need accountability in the current AI climate. And maybe we can point that to you, Zee.
I mean, so picking up on what Abeba said, like a lot of the way that we think about accountability in the research space and in the regulatory space is really quite narrowly looking at the models and some specific context, but we really need to think more broadly about what it's used for, because a system might be developed for one thing. Like ChatGPT is an excellent example of a system developed just for conversation and as a dialogue agent that can be used for many more things and can go on and impact many more things. So if we just focus on ChatGPT, we can think of how that has changed the landscape of education. This is really, really important that we bear in mind that these systems engage and affect far more widely than their original intentions are. And the other part is that we have centuries of evidence that we cannot rely on self-regulation of companies, of developers. It is important for us to go in and institute rules and boundaries so that we can limit how these technologies are used such that they don't, so that they're not used to cause harm on purpose or inadvertently.
I think inadvertently is a really nice way to put that, and I think a lot of the academics in the room will certainly recognize some of the maybe unintended consequences of things like ChatGPT. And I suppose the other thing that we were talking a little bit about, maybe it was mentioned, is the idea of safety, and there's been a lot of abuse and misuse of that kind of term. And I wonder, could you maybe speak about that? Who defines those standards? How do we define those standards? And you've spoken a little bit already about that. But
yeah, sure. Yeah. So I think the best way is to go back roughly 10 years when I was a graduate student at UC Berkeley in the Berkeley AI Research Lab. And I'm trained as a control systems engineer, control theory, systems theory, and in our tradition, it's about keeping an airplane in the air, right? So safety is a central value in our discipline. And I was sitting in a cubicle with students of Stuart Russell, who's a really big name in AI. I have a lot of respect for Stuart Russell. And they started talking about AI safety. And we were like, well, you guys don't do safety, right? So I've been a sort of early fly on the wall of seeing like how that community has really, which has originally already been funded by certain organizations that really promoted a form of safety that's much more about existential risk and losing control over a particular AI agent, which, we also need people thinking about these more fundamental, maybe a little bit more ivory tower questions, I would say, right? That's 10 years ago, right? Stuart Russell's doing a lot more now, but that was when I got my eyes opened up. And I think, unfortunately, a lot of the money that's been funneled into that has now defined a much more technical approach to safety that's rooted in the same kind of tools and language as AI itself. And as a result, is not really treating safety as what it is. Historically, if you look at the history of safety particularly for software-based automation, like systems subject to higher degrees of software-based automation, like autopilots in planes, for instance, we know that you cannot put a label like safe to an autopilot. An autopilot is not safe. You can make an autopilot more reliable, you can make models more reliable, but you cannot say they're safe. You have to look at the broader system. And unfortunately, we have seen recently the sort of crystallization of a really big push by tech companies also. They've joined that. Lots of forces that have crystallized in technical AI safety being very dominant in the US AI Safety Institute, the UK AI Safety Institute, and in the Systemic Risk Working Group, currently working on a code of practice for the AI Act for general purpose AI systems. So I think we still have decades to go, right? But I think we're missing a piece of we're not bringing enough of the lessons in from what we know about safety. There are more and more people that are pulled in, but we should be cautious by against self-regulatory schemes that are about certifying systems to be safe or models to be safe, etc. We need a much richer vocabulary and a broader conversation about what safety actually means.
And to be skeptical and critical about that as well, and the entire time. I think that's a great point. And I suppose on that, we should talk about maybe what accountability research entails and who should be held responsible at the end of the day, because we've been speaking about responsibility, but who should be held accountable at the end of the day? Maybe Abeba, you can speak about that.
This is a question for me.
Yeah, sure. Yeah.
Yeah. So what is AI accountability research? So over the past few years, I've worked a lot on what's become known as audits, mainly audits of training data sets. And audits are considered one of the practical ways to empirically evaluate the performance of a given system. And then the idea is that using those empirical evidence, using those results, then you can pursue accountability. You can go back to those that are building the model or the vendors, and you can go back, look, we examined X and Y, and here is what we found. You need to fix it, you need to retract the product from the market, and so on. So that's been, audits have been really crucial as a mechanism for accountability. But also, having worked around the topic of audits and having executed a number of audits of AI systems and training data sets, I have also become a little bit kind of hesitant about the impact of audits, because they tend to focus again on specific tools, specific released algorithms and AI systems. And they are great. They are, as I said, a way of producing empirical evidence to challenge, what's problematic. However, as I said, AI is not just, algorithms or computational calculations. It's much broader. And for a lot of the issues, we really can't audit ourselves out of, numerous problems. For example, I mentioned earlier, the ubiquitous integration of AI systems is leading to, loss of freedom of movement, freedom of speech, in places like Kenya, even in the US, student encampments and various demonstrations against governments due to technology, particularly facial recognition technology. Authorities are able to, identify whoever is leading these demonstrations. Before these technologies, you took comfort in going out in masses that you will not be picked or identified and picked out, and you will not be punished for that. But now we have these technologies constantly gathering data and identifying people and locating people means that there is no safety. So as a result, you have the really nuanced societal impact, what surveillance studies call the chilling effect. So these are gradual but very nuanced impacts that audits are not a great way of studying or investigating. So what I want to say is yes, audits accountability tends to come down to audits, but also accountability research also has to mean more than just evaluation or audit of a given model.
So you're speaking about kind of the limitations of audits really there, and I suppose we should talk about scenarios where audits maybe shouldn't be used. And are there any that come to mind, maybe see yourself?
Yeah, absolutely. So to pick up on the surveillance notion, a facial recognition system might have gaps. There are some early studies in around audits to show that there were these gaps in facial recognition systems. The result of these studies were to go and fix the facial recognition system so that they no longer had such pronounced gaps. And so this, while the technology is undoubtedly better functioning now than it was at that time, is that fundamentally a good? When we go to protest, we do want to be able to be hidden by the masses. When we move around the cities we live in, we want to be able to move around relatively anonymously unless we stand out in some particular way and so on, right? Like we want to actively be able to make the choice of, I want to stand out, I want to be seen, I want to be heard. And so when we fix these systems and when we audit these systems, we can very quickly go to the point of building better surveillance technologies. We can very quickly go towards building things that are better technologically, but also therefore better at doing harm.
It's a great answer, yeah, and I think everyone can relate to that one as well, which is fantastic. And I suppose we've been talking about guardrails and we've heard about, ways to implement regulation, and I suppose there's been other types of regulation implemented before, like, anti-gender discrimination law and that kind of thing. Is there anything that we can learn from those implementations when we implement, legislation around AI? And I suppose that's for everybody, if anybody has any particular ideas around that.
Well, I was maybe sort of to extend where we come from. If we look at GDPR, for instance, I think we pushed a lot of how that works out to lots of different organizations that have been struggling. As a result, there's lots of places where people are not able to use certain kinds of data that is actually able to. There are good ways to use it in responsible ways, but there's just a lack of knowledge. There's there's, of course, people don't want to take the risk with enforcers coming after them. So I think if we now look at the AI Act, for instance, in the Netherlands, our Ministry of Economic Affairs has been pretty, at least they say they've been pretty successful to sort of, they're co-writing, of course, the act, the regulation, the law. And I spoke with one of the key people there, and I said, well, the Netherlands thrives on small, medium enterprises. And I've been talking with small, medium AI companies that are doing really important things in the healthcare sector, but they don't have time to go to these standard conversations, right? So what happens is they send one delegate and they come there, and there's only big software company representatives around them. There's no doctors there, no nurses, there's no patient federations at the table. And that should give you pause, right? So I said, please, don't repeat this sort of, just, okay, we have a law, you have to now invest. And we do see that now. You do see that in the Netherlands, that some of us have been saying this, and we see that it's sort of seeping through to the cabinet. We'll see if that leads to any kind of investment in, shared standard setting, bringing the right people around the table. We also see other funders that are picking that up now to say, okay, if the government doesn't do it, we'll try to do it. So I think that's one important lesson that I hope we'll see a lot more of it, because it's in the interest of our economies, right? So.
Definitely, and I suppose on that, is there anything that we can do really to motivate, especially industrial bodies, to do that, do you think? And again, everybody, if anyone has any particular ideas around that.
Yeah, sure. I think, as the minister, as the Secretary General said, AI has just all of a sudden has become everywhere, and people feel like they have no control, and the change is so rapid, not just the general public, even as a researcher who isn't inside the field, you just feel like you just can't catch your breath. There is just new models, new data sets released constantly. So it's really difficult to, how to regulate, how to study, how to study its societal impacts and so on. But I think practically the AI industry can learn from any other industry. Take traditional media, there are clear regulations and guidelines. Take the pharmaceutical industry, take any given industry. When we build bridges, we don't just build it and open it to the public. They are stress tested, they are vetted, and really a lot of work goes into assurance, into making sure that these systems actually work as they intended, and that they cause no harm. If you take any simple home appliance, say a microwave, before it goes to the market, there are so many safety guardrails that they have to test and they have to vet before the product is released into the market. And in a way, because we are integrating AI into critical infrastructure, it's no difference. We have to get rid of this thinking, this framing that pitches innovation against regulation. And we have to embrace the idea that actually, innovation that helps everybody is one that is actually, that abides by regulation, that is actually tested, vetted, and safe for everybody.
That's a great way to contextualize it, I think, and it's so true that these systems, for other aspects of let's say, safety, health and safety, and that kind of thing, are implemented, and so it's quite encouraging, and that's really great. Well, I suppose in the interest of time, we might finish up, but I always do like to summarize a little bit about what we've spoken about. So I think we've got a really good understanding maybe now, or a better understanding of what accountability is, and sort of the idea of safety, and maybe what ways that's been misused, and really that we kind of can't count maybe on particular industrial bodies to regulate themselves, and that we need more robust and very nuanced legislation around this. And I think, yeah, there's some great outcomes. So thank you very much to all our panelists.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, so thank you, Ellen, and to all the panelists and Abeba. So continuing proceedings this evening, I'm delighted to introduce two of the funders for the AI Accountability Lab. Naomi Alexander Naidu is the partnerships lead with Luminate, and Fanny Hidvegi is the policy director with AI Collaborative, an initiative of the Omidyar Group. And they'll now give a brief address.
Thank you so much, Declan. We are really thrilled to be here at the launch of the AI Accountability Lab. I'm Naomi Alexander Naidu from Luminate. Luminate is a global foundation with a mission that this lab really embodies, ensuring that technology and AI respects human rights and social justice.
And my name is Fanny Hidvegi. I'm the policy director at the AIAL Collaborative, an initiative of the Omidyar Group. We were created as a philanthropic organization to help govern AI on democratic basis, and to ensure that the public has a critical voice in AI governance and development. And this setup is a lot of fun for us. It's probably the closest we'll get to the feeling of presenting an award at a movie festival. But we are truly excited to be part of the launch and the setup of the AI Accountability Lab at Trinity College Dublin. We will both say just a very few words why this initiative is so dear to our hearts, and why it is crucial in the European AI landscape and beyond. I'm a lawyer by training, and I truly, truly hated all 5 years of law school. The same university that used to be the home of the democratic opposition of Hungary in the 80s and the 90s. It became a place of abuse, hierarchy, sexism, racism, adhering to norms serving the status quo rather than fueling curiosity and courage. Inadvertently, it did give my education a purpose and a mission. I decided that I can and I will use my relative privilege to search for a profession to dismantle power structures. Before joining the AI Collaborative, I spent most of my career in civil society at the intersection of human rights and technology. The single most valuable part of working for civil society is intellectual freedom, something that's very much associated with academia as well. Civil society and academia should go hand in hand. Evidence and research should feed into setting the agenda, policy impact, and ultimately societal change. I always joke that Dr. Birhane is one of the very, very few reasons left to open Twitter these days. But much more importantly, Dr. Birhane's work serves as a critical infrastructure in multiple ways. Her technical skills, knowledge, and ability to assess technology is really essential for the entire field of tech justice and social justice accountability. Her research creates bridges between academia and civil society. Dr. Birhane has unique skills to translate complex socio-technical issues to wider audiences, create public awareness, and change what decision makers think of an issue. Up until recently, I was neck deep in the policy and advocacy side of AI accountability, including the EU AI Act. And I really think it fell short of what societies need in a context of AI, but we can keep that debate for another day. But I will just say one thing, I can't help myself continuing on one thought on the facial recognition conversation. There's absolutely no radical about saying that something that is inherently against human rights norms in Europe and beyond should be banned or prohibited. That should not be part of a political negotiation. At the AI Collaborative, we are trying to inspire and enable an affirmative vision about what AI should be. But there is no affirmative vision without addressing the harms and holding the powerful accountable, whether it's a state actor or the private sector. And Dr. Birhane's work is crucial in that regard.
Thank you so much, Fanny. I really couldn't agree more. For Luminate, there are three big reasons why we're so excited to be supporting this lab and believe it will play a crucial role in holding tech companies and states accountable. Firstly is the lab's commitment to centering the voices of those most impacted. We know that as AI reshapes society, it often worsens existing inequalities, and the already marginalized communities are bearing the brunt of the negative impacts. Dr. Birhane and her team will approach AI with a strong social justice lens and, crucially, a historical power analysis. Secondly, at Luminate, we are particularly excited about the lab's cross-continental approach and the dual focus on both Europe and Africa. On the one hand, we know that perspectives from Africa and the global south more broadly are too often missing in these conversations on the global stage. At the same time, there is a vibrant and growing ecosystem of civil society organizations across Africa working towards a better future for AI and technology. And at Luminate, we are privileged to be able to work with and support many of these groups. Meanwhile, Europe, as we've spoken about, plays a pivotal role in global tech regulation that has implications far beyond Europe's borders. This dual focus will enable the lab to have impacts in both contexts and beyond. Finally is the lab's orientation towards action. Dr. Birhane and her team will not only produce groundbreaking research, but they will translate this research into evidence-based insights to inform policy in Europe and Africa and influence global governance discussions. In this way, the lab will equip policymakers, activists, and communities with the tools to advocate and realize the equitable AI future we all need. I'm just going to end by saying that I first met Dr. Birhane at an event in South Africa earlier this year, where she spoke about the reality of AI and its impacts to a room of business and government leaders from across the African continent who had, up until that point, really only heard kind of positive and industry-driven narratives on AI and all of its potential. I was really amazed at her ability to cut through these narratives with hard facts and excellent analysis and genuinely shift perspectives in such a short space of time. I thought to myself then, well, if that's what she can do in an hour with just a PowerPoint, imagine what she can do with a team, resources, and an institution behind her.
Apologies for the coughing. I'm just so cold. Are you not cold? Yeah. So we would like to end with one testimonial written after this event Naomi just spoke about the Africa in the world. The following day, Ethiopian cognitive scientist Dr. Abeba Birhane amplified the theme. Her work systematically peels back AI's limits, cautioning that the hype of AI exceeds its capabilities and more grievously hides its flaws. Birhane warned, we should not be distracted by apocryphal warnings of the robots taking over, but must pay far closer attention to its current failings, resulting in people unjustly jailed, losing livelihoods, denied access to credit and countries. She observed that the datasets underpinning AI models are often amplify hateful content with devastating effects for society's most vulnerable. The audience wrote furiously. It wasn't hard to imagine questions cascading through the continent's largest organizations. Change was seeded. Thank you.